So in the last video, we went ahead and finished off this config class, and we made it to where we can load other configurations, even configurations not managed by this config class at all. We can load our own files, all of that if we want to. So I don't know if there's anything I'm missing here. So if there is, please let me know in the comments below. If there's something you'd like for me to add to this class, please let me know. So we went ahead and wrote this config file, but I want to go a little bit more on what Docker is actually used for. Uh, we went pretty deep. We allowed this env variable to be accessed. The server get post request file to load from an external file, and then this config to load from another configuration file somewhere in the project. So, excuse me, that's pretty cool there. So what is Docker really used for? So if you see here, I'm actually using this environment variable, right? And the cool thing about Docker is I can actually come in here and I can create something called a .env file, right? And inside of this .env file, I can basically put all of these variables in place, right? And I don't need them to be in that format anymore, right? And I can remove this environment flag there. And it should work as far as what I was reading on the Docker configuration or the Docker documentation. It should work. And if we come over here and we hit this refresh button, yeah, that's still working. But if we, not PHP Storm, but if we go back to Visual Studio and we look at our web root and we look at our config database.json, I want to say env, and whatever we put inside of this env variable, right? Maybe I want to get the mode, right? And let's go look here and say mode here, right? So if we look here, well, that's null. That's not working. So if we come back over here to the Docker configuration or the Docker documentation, that's kind of hard to say. We can look at how this environmental variable works, or this environment file. So we can define our own custom file here, but it says the .env file should work. So what I'm assuming is this .env file is built into Linux, but we need to be able to get this file passed down into our service. So the way that we're going to do this is I'm going to come into the docker compose.yml file. I'm going to put this env file there, and I'm going to say .env, right? And if we go look at how that is, that should actually be an array. Okay, fine. And we'll put /. Okay, so if I come over here and I hit refresh after I bring the compose down, and I go docker compose up again, if I hit refresh, look, there's our variable. So the idea and the reason I'm telling you about this is because if I want to have a service here for config, right, but I also want a service here for front end, right, I can do a build, right, and I can say /front end, right. I can actually define another env file, and this will become very important really soon. And I can say that is equal to ./env, right? And I want this to be available on port 80, and I want this to be on port 80, but I don't want to expose this config here, so I can come in here and do that, right? And if I go create this front end folder here, not a file, but a folder here, and I call it front end, right? and I come in here and I say, okay, I want to create a new file, and this is going to be called Docker file, right? And I go copy this the Docker file from before. I'll just paste that in over here. What does this allow me to do? Well, this allows me to do a couple of different things. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this copy and this change ownership because we don't need that right now. So this allows me to do a couple of things, and I'm going to go ahead and do a Docker compose down again. And I'm going to, front end port contains invalid type. Okay, that's my fault. That should be right here. Okay, let's go do that again. So let's do a Docker compose down. And let's do a Docker compose up, build file, Docker front end. Did I name this wrong or something like that? Front end. Okay, so if we come over here and let's go back. I don't know what's causing this. Users getting this documents Docker front end Docker file. If it does not exist, it's not a valid URL. Okay. Build / front end Docker file. What did I do wrong here? Seems to be valid. Okay, so let's just move up. Let's cancel that. Let's rename this to Dockerfile.frontend. Okay, cool. Let's move that. And let's delete this folder here. We'll delete that. And we will look at this Docker compose. Oh, that's why. Let's undo that. Can I not do that? That's why. So I had that in the wrong folder. Let's go create that front end folder again. And that should be not in webroot. That should be down here. Okay. And let's go move this Docker file to front end. Let's move that again. And let's rename. See, I don't like the way that Visual Studio does folders. I don't. It throws me off. Okay, so let's go do a Docker compose down, and up has active endpoints. Okay, so let's go do an undo on this entire file. Okay, so let's do that, and let's do a Docker compose down. Okay, so now let's go ahead and rewrite our front end code here, and let's build and let's publish ports. '80 to '80. Okay, and let's get rid of these, and we can say env file, and that's going to be, and we'll copy that, and we'll chunk it here, right? That looks great. So now if I come over here and do a Docker compose ups, I must specify direct build and path. Okay. So, oops, I don't know what I'm doing here, but let's go try that again. Okay, everything's up. If I come over here and I hit refresh, I get a 403 error, which is perfect. That's exactly what I wanted. But if I come over here and do a docker ps, I have two services that are up. If I do a docker exec -it, we see here this is our front end service. We got to specify everything that makes it unique, so 0, 7, D in this case, and we do bash, right? So the cool thing is I can go ahead and clear this out. If I run top, the only thing that's running there is Apache and bash and top, right? The cool thing here is now that I have two services running under here, I can ping one or the other by the host name, right? So I'm inside of the front end. So if I go hit ping and I paste that in there, apt get install inet IP utils ping. Gotta go install it real quick first. Now, if I ping that host name there, you see I can ping it, but this 172 IP address, that's not my local computer's IP address. So what's happening here? Let me go ahead and cancel this out. What's happening here? Well, behind the scenes, Docker has its own networking system. It's very powerful. It also has its own DNS server built in, which is really cool because now these services have their own internal IP addresses, and that's what this port definition is for. That way I can bind my network card or my network adapter, port 80 from my machine, into the Docker container, right? The Docker container has its own IP address. It's its own separate entity. Same thing with both of these services, and that's very powerful. And the reason behind that is if I'm coding and I have different microservices and I need them to communicate with one another, they can communicate to each other by host name, not by the IP address. Well, I mean, the host name will translate into the IP address, but we should never have to know the IP address of the Docker container itself, which is very nice. So later on in the series, we're going to be working with this a lot more, and we're going to be adding load balancers and things like that. And what that's going to allow us to do is, say we have 100 servers here, we can actually host all of our different containers against all of these different servers, and I can host 5 of these containers, 4 of these, 2 of these, and whatever's being stressed out more can have more power. And that's the reason we want to do microservices. One of the big reasons behind that, because if I'm using all of my resources to send emails, well, that's what I want to do. I want to use all my resources to send emails. I may have 3 dedicated servers sitting there. All of them is responsible for sending emails, but I want the rest of this application to communicate with that service. That's great. That's exactly what we want. Okay, so instead of scaling out the entire application, we scale out different parts of the application in a smaller scale. So we have more granular control over the application as a whole. And that is what makes Docker so powerful. Not only that is I can take this configuration file and I can hand that off to a developer, and the developer can run all of these services on his computer without the need of going and saying, oh, well, this depends on this depends on that, this depends on that. He doesn't have to go figure out all that dependency list. All he has to do is throw this file on his computer, and he's off to the races. Without further ado, I thank you for watching this video. I hope you have a little bit more of an understanding of why I'm actually using Docker in this scenario. And later on, as we progress, we'll be talking about microservices. So that configuration system that we just did, or that configuration class, that's going to become a microservice of its own. A service that is responsible for doing nothing but handling the configuration. Anyway, I hope you guys have liked this video. If you did, leave it a thumbs up. If you didn't, you know what to do. Anyway, guys, have a good day.